All right, welcome to the chat, everybody.
Afternoon.
Welcome, welcome.
Yeah, let's go ahead and put the link in the announcements to
Oh
Zor.
yeah, I should have done that. My space.
Yep. Give
Sorry,
him a
I got
second, put that in, and then we'll start answering some questions. All right, everybody. Sorry for the technical difficulties and a little bit of a late start. We're trying to get Roy's system up and running here with OBS, and I have no desire to ever have a career in Twitch streaming, so that made it a bit difficult. But hopefully, we're coming in well. If for some reason we're not, please let us know. And just remember, folks, that we've got that Q&A channel in the Discord, so you can post your questions there. Is going to be the easiest thing. I don't know about anybody else. Maybe they'll be more diligent than me, but I'm not keeping a close eye on the chat here in Twitch. So
That's why I'm here for you.
awesome. So we've got Marguerite, we've got Zor, and then we've got myself, Roy. I'm going to let Zor kind of start and take the lead here.
I don't know what the hell to say. So we got some questions. Do we want to start with those, or do we want to kind of talk about some of the creation process?
Let's go ahead and start with the question.
All right. So we got a couple questions. Where the hell is Discord? My multitude, excuse me. All right. So Storm wanted to know what time period is planned for last call. I can't remember. What did the writers say? Yeah, well, I knew what the answer was, but I couldn't remember if we were permitted to divulge that. Um,
It should cover a few months.
Storm says he can't hear.
I just-
Yeah, I'm having trouble hearing Zor.
well, it's because I'm not eating the mic because I have to re-get used to. How is this?
That sounds much better to me.
Yeah.
better to
So
me.
I just
Can you
gotta,
guys
I
let
just
us
gotta
know?
have the mic in my mouth. That's fine. I am eating it. Jesus.
Storm says
um,
it's better.
Okay.
Alrighty. So yeah, Storm. That would be so. Just couple months. I mean, it isn't to say that things couldn't change, but that is what the writers pretty much sketched out, more or less everything to a degree. Let's see, Wolvie. We see that Max is well sick. I'm guessing from smoking. Is it something that can be regulated with medication, or something a little more serious, where we have to worry about his health and how long he has? We have the writer. I'm going to have to hold just a sec and see what we're allowed to talk about.
I'll go ahead and just answer part of that and say that Dot 2 is going to answer that a bit more.
Oh, that is the answer.
Mm-hmm. Yep, so a little bit of a waiting game, but not too long to find out a bit more as far as that, and I'm sure more will be revealed ongoing, but having been doing some of the renders for those scenes in Dot 2 here the last few days, I'm pretty acquainted with the fact that you'll get a much better idea in Dot 2.
And unfortunately, we only have one more question so far. Sharky wants to know if game doesn't limit you with time, it can more of a sandbox. Wonders if patrons want it, could we have both modes? Unfortunately, a bearer of bad news, we will not be doing a sandbox. This is our first game. I'm new to the Ren'Py language, and while I could probably pull up a sandbox, you'd be looking at 4 months in between Dot 2 and Dot 3 at that point. So not something we're entertained. It's not off the table for another game, but we are not doing it for the first game. Otherwise, I will keep the Discord open. Hopefully, get a couple more questions.
Yeah, absolutely. So post those questions if you've got them in the Discord. In the meantime, we'll go ahead and just transition and Zord, let's talk a bit about how everything kind of came together. In terms of us forming as a team, we don't have to get into the entire backstory, but just a bit.
Oh,
and
okay.
Yeah,
I can spark something up a little.
I was going to say we can be selective. I don't think everybody needs the long, boring history, but we'll talk a bit about that, and then we can get into a bit of the character development, kind of behind the scenes. And again, if we start to get more questions, feel free to somebody to interrupt us, and we'll take some questions.
Actually, if there's a mod around who's actually paying attention to this, if questions come in that we missed, please let us know. I'll keep the
I'm keeping an eye on them for you, Zor.
I got to bounce me.
Perfect.
Twitter account.
Yep.
But as for the team itself, Thunderline as a whole actually started before Roy. It was this was back when Zeno was actually still going to be the writer. Would have been June of 2018. We started to put a team together, and we had a different artist at the time. Long story short on that, it just wasn't working out with the artist, and we had to part ways. And this would have been honestly near the following June, like late April, early May. And that February, I had seen in passing that Roy was starting to play with rendering, making art. He was talking to Philly and asking him about some stuff. And so then and Roy and I had become friends by this point. We were talking on occasion, and in groups where he was playing. We'd play games together, whatever. I reached out to him and I said, "Hey, look, I could use an artist. I know you're into this. I know you're new. Do you have any interest?" And initially he had to pass as he was just too busy. And about 6 hours later, he messaged me back and he said, I've been thinking about this all afternoon, and actually I think I would like to join. And I mean, that's kind of essentially the formulation of the group as of the quarter as it stands. And then when we started talking about other aspects that we wanted to bring in, social media came up, to which I said nope. And then we were talking to Marguerite one time when she
Can you turn up your volume a little bit, please? Sorry, I've got a couple comments.
One sec. How's this?
Much better.
Okay, so she and her husband were over. We were having dinner, and we were talking about what to do. And one of the first things she said was Twitter's a dumpster fire. So we nixed the idea of Twitter. However, Roy does do that other one that I'm not sure how active he is with that. But then we decided on Instagram. And Mark knows how to Instagram, and I said, well, do you want to do that for us? And she said, sure. And around this time, we realized that we kind of need a new writer, even though we had a direction for the story. Things had to change in regards to who was writing it just because of profession issues. And so that's when we brought another one, but they wanted to remain entirely anonymous, even though we've kind of conned them into being a little more vocal. So they won't be on this call, but they are listening. As for the rest of the team, a very good friend of mine, pretty much a brother to me, has helped me with getting a lot of better understanding of the code, how to do source control management, things that have helped make things flow nicer, and then automate a lot of the build process, which takes pretty much all of it out of my local system and then onto, well, for lack of a better word, the cloud. And then it's easier for us to disseminate the content to users much more quickly. And it's just nice. But outside of that, that's pretty much the team. We might end up with one more person. We'll see how things go. And if it happens, there'll be an announcement about it. But outside of that, that's pretty much where the team is now.
All right, I've got a request from a few people here that still the volume needs to go up a bit more. So
really?
Yep. So I'm going to adjust the overall. No, everybody. So I'm going to adjust the overall slider there just a bit, and hopefully that's a bit better for everybody. So, all right. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good overview of the team. Yeah, I wasn't sure initially. I've got a pretty busy day job, and I'll actually have a little bit more to say about that in tomorrow's dev post. But definitely have definitely wasn't sure the commitment level. The artist I knew best at the time was Philly, and he sets an unrealistic level of rendering speed that the rest of us can't hope to match. And so I was like, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to pull that off, but decided it was something I wanted to do, and have enjoyed it. Although that kind of leads us into character creation, and I think that may be something that's interesting to people as to how these characters came to be. So I'm gonna kind of start out on that, and Zora, feel free to interject at any point.
Real quick, we're getting it up. K-Storm asked a quick question.
Okay.
My experience with Python, it's actually the language I probably know the strongest, yet I've still forgotten most of it. That's the language that they started teaching when I was in college. So the language that they introduced you to, you went from Python to Java, and then I ended up with a C# class. But at that point, coincidentally, the good friend of mine that is doing the pipeline stuff, he and I self-taught C# prior to that class. I'm strong enough. It's more so I understand the basics of coding, and once you understand that, it's all about shit. Why can't I think of the word? The semantics of the language, the specificity of the language, like what it takes to do this same thing in a different language, just knowing the right words to use. And if there's semicolons that end it, how you build loops, things like that. So I'm strong enough in it, and it's all kind of coming back to me slowly as I have to touch other things. And then you're like, oh, yeah, I remember how that works. I remember that now. So that's kind of where that sits. And Sharky, no promises on the double D plus titties.
You could, however, always do a commission with Roy, if you'd like.
Right. But I don't
Shameless
know.
plug!
This
is why I'm your social
I can't even say this on the stream.
And you want to answer Keystorm's other question then? Zora,
yeah,
then we'll
sure.
Go back to the character.
Sorry, I have to send this quick. All right, so Keystorm's other question. Another person. No, they're already in. This was something I picked up. Like, this guy is a goddamn coding genius. He's literally one of my best friends. The other person bringing in. No, they've kind of been tapped. It's just going to be a matter of if they have the time to do what we've asked of them. That's all that is. And if it falls through, I think it's something that we're not going to pursue further. So we'll see. Yeah, it is a specific role.
All right, so back to the character creation here. Well, the way I'll just say that when the way these things start out is I got pretty clear guidelines for the characters in terms of fairly good breakdown. Hair color, hairstyle, overall weight, specific features if they needed to be included, that sort of thing. And so my job then initially was to spend time trying to create those with my meager DAS skills. However, some of the characters I won't say have branched far from the initial thing that I was given, but we've made a few tweaks. So I think Morgan's one of the more interesting ones, and Zora can attest. So we spent maybe 2-3 weeks kind of working on Morgan and trying to get that out, and that's something we were overall fairly happy with, right? In fact, if you were really following us in the early days, you might have seen some really, really early previews of that Morgan. But then I'm just fooling around in DAS one night to blow off some steam and created kind of this character that I figured I could fill the background, right? And sent Zora the image, and probably 5-10 minutes later, Zora comes back and says, that needs to be Morgan.
Yup, pretty much.
So at that time, the character did not fit Morgan's body proportions and a few other things that we had set, as well as hairstyle and everything. So I worked and got that moved over. But that's Morgan. Fiona has been our most difficult in terms of really getting nailed down. And she's still one of the more difficult characters in terms of making sure poses and expressions fit her well. And then there's some other ones that came about easier. I don't know that any of them came super easy, but there were a few that we were probably looking at 3 or 4 major iterations before we really felt we nailed them down. Sorry guys, I'm taking a sip of my beer here.
Yeah, this is a 2-drink minimum live stream.
Yeah, I've only got one and I'm almost done, so I went through like a bottle before we even started, so that'll be fun. But I mean, character creation is always one of the tough things. One of the things that we strived for, and that was a guideline given to me, and I enjoy it more anyway, was that we wanted realistic characters. There's nothing against some of the artists out there who do, shall I say, more unrealistic proportions and things like that. That's fine. It's a game. It's not a big deal. But that was not where we wanted to go with this. So that's one of the reasons that you see kind of what you see with the characters. And then another thing that I wanted to do, because God knows there's enough VNs out there where the male characters look like they got run over with a truck and then beat with a shovel.
Don't sugarcoat it.
I mean, nobody spends any time on those. And so I wanted, especially since some of these characters really going to have personality, really going to be in the scene. In fact, in some cases, some of these scenes are largely, male dialogue scenes, two guys chatting with each other, that I wanted them to be, I won't even say necessarily attractive, but I wanted them to be decent looking, and that you were not like, okay, get these off the screen so I can just see the hot chicks.
Yeah, that's pretty much what it is. And we've gotten. I was never expecting compliments on our male characters. I am dead serious.
Yeah.
I just got a message from a writer. Quote, I see the request for more large-breasted women. We've pretty much got our selection of characters planned or prepared that you will see. We have tried to have a variety of body shapes, sizes. Hi, McShorty. Hopefully they enjoy our thick Morgan and curvaceous cougar. And yes, to... What? Sorry, there's some confusion in the message I'm being sent. Oh, second to Roy. Yes. She agrees, Roy.
All right. And K-Storm's got another question here, so thank you, K-Storm, for keeping this moving along. He asked, when you scrapped the old bar for the new one, was it a scene problem like renders didn't work in it as you wanted, or was it something else? So that was a combination of things. I'll speak to that since I was the one who ended up having to come up with a totally new bar on short notice. But I had spent weeks modeling the other one. Got a lot of assets that you would never find anywhere else because they were either custom done or gotten from something not off the DAZ store and other 3D modeling programs, maybe like 3D Studio Max or Maya, and converted over so they'd work fine in DAZ. And it was a nice bar in some senses, but we had some issues with it, and ultimately was just the size of that bar, with the way some of the models were higher poly and some other things that just were not working well. Lighting was more of a pain as I got into it. I've learned a whole lot going through this experience, and one of the ones now is I know much better earlier how to figure out if an environment's going to work from a lighting perspective and how to make some adjustments. But for there, that ceiling was super high, and so that caused some problems with lighting and looking realistic. So it was a combination. And then the bar model that we found, I happened to find on the DAZ store as a new release, I think same day or a couple days after it was released, and just decided to kind of see how quickly I could make some tweaks to it and send it over to the team, and they were all like, well, we hate to say it, but we do really like it, even though you spent all this time on the other one. So just decided to get that going there.
But it did improve your render times, or did you mention that already? Like the size was so much.
Yeah. So the scene loading was a big help. Scene loading was much faster with the new bar, which is important, especially when you're loading these things over and over. And render times are much faster, again, because of the way certain things are positioned. It's the one nice thing about not everything on the DAZ store, but some of the more reliable creators of assets, is they do look at things like render times and overall fit and that sort of thing. So these things work a lot better there. And K-Storm, will you be adding more objects around the scene to make the bar feel more alive, like pictures on the wall? So we've got in a few other areas some pictures and things. We probably will be adding certain things over time. The issue is the more stuff you add, the more load you're adding to your overall scene. So that can affect render times, and more importantly, can affect things like VRAM usage. And that's something, even with Octane's benefits, I still have to be mindful of. There's some pretty big show-stopping bugs in Octane if you go over a certain amount in a scene. As Zor can attest, as I think he's heard me scream from Thunderline Southern Command. And so again, it seems nice, and it's just a trade-off of these things. Obviously, I'm not one of those beautiful 3D rendering companies that has a whole suite of systems and can work around this, and also that uses something like a Maya or a 3D Studio Max that quite honestly is just a heck of a lot more tuned and heavy duty than something like DAZ. So that's obviously a little limitation.
Yeah, the biggest thing ultimately comes down to, if we can't even make the image because it crashes, we have to pull stuff. That was a big thing with the previous bar. There were so many polygons and everything. We had issues where we've had to pull assets just because the assets looked amazing, but the polygon count was too high, and it effectively was one of the bigger reasons that scenes either would take long to load, or even once you got a character or two in there, the whole scene would just crash. So it's a balancing act of realism versus being realistically able to provide what we need.
And of course, too, I mean, with the way I use depth of field and everything, there's a lot of things that, you might see an outline, but rarely are you going to see a lot of these things up close. So that also plays a role, too, that I'm a little bit more mindful that, when you're just doing shots around the bar, it looks really, really good. Oh, and have you considered multiple bars with small objects in different areas to load in? Sounds great. Doesn't work in practice because most of these scenes, some cases I'm really limited and like they're in one particular area of the bar, so that would work. So nobody else, kind of like a Hollywood set, would have to know that, there's no wall over here or there's this entire section that's missing. But a lot of scenes we might have full bar movement, where somebody's going almost from one end of the bar to the other. And so then I've got to take time and load that in and set it up and make sure things came over and do a whole lot of adjustments. So again, for workflow as you get in, a lot of these things I can attest because I was one of them that, when you're doing just a few renders here and there, it's not a big deal. But I mean, we're cranking out, first release had well over 400 renders. If you count animations, we were at well over 800 total images in that game. And Dot 2, not to spoil too much from my dev update tomorrow, but Dot 2 is going to be quite a bit bigger than Dot 1. So, trying to get these, it's this thing of balance. And I've got to keep my sanity and not have to worry, did I load this in or do I have to get this? For scenes, I just like to have most things kind of loaded in and ready to rock and roll. So when I get in the rhythm, I'm not having to slow myself down too much.
Should we talk about Fiona?
We can talk about, Fiona.
Were we done with Morgan?
Yeah, I think, yeah. I mean, Morgan's pretty easy.
You covered it pretty well.
Yep.
So Fiona was arguably our worst character to create, hardest character to create. How 6-7 renditions?
I thought it was closer to 9, but
it probably was. We went back and forth several times, and there were things we liked and things we didn't like. And finally, I reached out to Roy and was like, "We're gonna have to screen share. We're gonna have to step." So we did just that. I watched his system. We stepped through a lot of female head, models. And we're like, all right, we both like that one. Let's grab that one. That one. I think we ended up with like 13 girls, and then we narrowed them down from that to like 6, and then started doctoring them up a bit. And that was the final iteration. Prior to that, we had just try this, no, try this, no, try this, no. And even the final iteration, where you said 2 weeks you spent on her?
I think it was about 2 weeks. Yeah, off and on. I was doing a few other things during, but for the most part, it was the fee show for 2 weeks. And I mean, hair was troublesome for her. Some textures, kind of getting things to match the way we wanted, was a little troublesome. Some of these characters just come together easily. You find a base model that's kind of close, and so then you just have to tweak. And that's another thing too, that I don't create these models purely from scratch in a 3D program where I'm sculpting like a ZBrush or something like that. But these are heavily modified from, a DAZ. All our main characters are heavily modified from a DAZ model. So there's all sorts of different combos I do, all sorts of different morphs and things like that I add. So at least nobody's, just browsing through the DAZ store. And you might be able to pick out some of the inspirations, but hopefully you're not able to be like, oh, that's exactly that. Now, background characters, I'm a little more forgiving because you're typically not going to see them for too long. So if it's a good model, then I'll go ahead and take that with just some minor adjustments. But yeah, Fee was a while. We spent, I think, half a day just on the eyes for her.
Yep.
And so that was a lot of, it's a custom Photoshop eye thing there for her, and some other things there. So yeah, I mean, some characters just come together quicker. Annie went through, I think, 2 or 3 major iterations, and we won't talk about all the plastic surgery she's had since.
We don't mention those things, Roy. That's something a girl keeps.
No.
That's right.
Not plastic surgery, skin grafts.
Yes, skin grafts, yes. The poor woman's been to the burn unit so many times. And again, some of this is just, I was new and didn't quite know some things to look for, and so would kind of discover those later. And some other things, just as you kind of work with the model, you realize, oh wait, this seemed great in practice, but this really isn't working out. Or seemed great in theory, but it's not working out well in practice.
And then what was fun with Max?
Oh yes.
When it came time to work on him, I don't remember. Did you have one kind of sketched up? And then I made my request, or did I make it from the beginning?
I had an old dude, because I'd gone through several of the models just based on the descriptions. And then comes the infamous... Tell you what, you've been screening stuff on me with Max, is what I've come to realize with this. You've been screening stuff on me with Max, is what I've come, asking for the Yun Max model right before release, and which we'll get into. But no,
Roy hates me.
But yeah, you can talk about what your vision for Max was, and so then what we kind of had to work around.
I was trying to remember if you had one worked up or not, and whether he did or didn't. I pretty much I messaged him and I said, "Can we do Sam Elliott?" Because that was how he was written, was like very Bo Bennett from The Ranch. And I was like, we got to make him look like Sam Elliott. And no, it's not the same hair or anything like that, but he definitely has a similar thin, gaunt, but still very powerful, present look.
We have a question from France. Hey, Thunderline's International here. You mentioned number of renders. Funny how it became a big thing for many devs. Does it really matter for total numbers, or would it be more important for quality over quantity? And that's a great question, and it's a balance. I'll talk kind of about my philosophy, and then Zor can certainly chime in. Obviously, we pretty much have the same one since we've discussed this.
I should probably start cutting you off, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm fine with it. I'm not insulted. So that's the whole point of this thing. But I think it's a balance. So what I look for when I'm going through is I go through the script that our writer has delivered, and I figure out where I want to put renders in. Now, our writer definitely does a lot of descriptions, like, hey, I want him to be angry, or I want him to be sad, or sometimes uses really good things where they break out the thesaurus, and I have to go find out what that term actually means, and then try to translate that into something that I'm looking for, and maybe even kind of go through Google and look through some images to figure out exactly how I want the face to face, and maybe the gestures and things to match. But so I go through that. So number for me is a somewhat baseline. I mean, there are games where you can have a few number of renders, but it can still feel like a heavy update if they were at the right place. One of the things that has always bugged me about VNs has been the fact that sometimes people will have somebody, let's say they're angry in a scene, and then they calm down, but they don't change the render. So you have the dialogue not matching the expression. So it's one reason that we rotate renders as quickly as we do for the shots, is we'll sometimes have those abrupt changes, and I want to make sure to capture that, even if it's a fairly slight thing of just a tweak with the camera angle, maybe a slight gesture change, and then the expression change to go with it. So number is not all, obviously. In fact, last ones, or I think we cut 100 or so renders, not that we're all completed, but that we originally planned, and then kind of as we got into the story, we're like, these aren't needed. It was
at least 75, but I think you're right. I think we ended up cutting over 100.
And then I think, we, obviously animations kind of came at the last minute. We cut a good amount of those because they just didn't measure up for quality. Yeah. And then and then I cut some done renders. So when I say 100, I had 100 or a little bit over in the script additional that we decided ultimately no. And some of those were rendered out, and then when we played through it, we decided they weren't needed, or maybe they didn't meet the quality standards. And in other cases, it was just a matter of, as I work through the scene, sometimes I'll be like, I don't really need another render here. It seemed like I did when I was reading the script, but I get a better feel for how that flows.
I'm not going to add much to that, just that I do agree for sure, quality over quantity, but you also walk that fine line too, because one of the critiques, we didn't see a lot of it, but a couple people said the play wasn't the game wasn't very long for R.1, and that's fine. It depends on how you play it. If you're a fast reader, you're going to burn through it pretty quick. If you take your time, one person did the auto, and it came out at just over an hour, but auto's going to step through a little bit slower, probably even than the average reader. But you want to try find that balance. So what I should say is, I don't ever think we plan to inundate with images, with renders, they're going to serve the purpose. To say that our next updates, it is going to be bigger, but the script is also longer. So It's not just that we're taking the same, 55, 60 pages of script that we had last time, and then we're going to cram. We're not doing 700 renders. Don't think that's. I'm not promising just throwing a number at that. So we're not going to cram the 700 renders into 55 pages that we had just only done 400 with last time. If the render serves a purpose, it's going to be there. If it doesn't serve a purpose, there's not going to be a render. We could have 3 or 4 lines of click-throughable dialogue on the same image, or we could have one and then have one and then a new image and then one and the new image. It's all going to be based on how we handle it. As for your second question, Baka, the script is done first. So for the most part, probably 100% of it, it's that the script influences the renders. It isn't to say that we haven't had a couple small instances where we did make maybe a minor tweak to dialogue in regards to a render, but for the most part, by design and by our process and our workflow, the script, renders, and then my happy ass coding.
Yep, and I mean, again, I know different devs do it differently. Some I know do the renders and then basically write the dialogue into that. It's nothing against that. That's a fine approach. It's just not the approach that we take. And so, I'll occasionally maybe ask for something additional, but I mean, it's been pretty rare. Normally, unless I feel there's a problem with the script, I mean, I think the only time the renders that I can think have really influenced the script is sometimes the script notes may say, "Hey, this is taking place," and then I have to come back to the writer and say, well, I'm not able to do that in DAZ. So what are our other options to convey that? So it's more or less that sort of thing. And I mean, one of the big things that I've learned just going through this is, we've kind of honed our processes. Dot 2.
Well, it evolved.
It evolved. I mean, one of the big things is just, again, learning how to consistently be able to get this out, to keep your quality, and to not end up having a ton of either wasted effort or a ton of time where you're just tweaking little things. So I look at all the renders. In fact, Zor can attest, I probably, after our .1 went to beta, even before we got feedback from beta, I just went back through it for another time, and I think I updated probably 50, 60 images.
Yeah.
Sounds about right.
You updated 50 or 60, and then after the first beta, even before they literally they were working on it, you went back through again and had another 10.
Yeah, there were quite a few adjustments. Some were as simple as stuff people missed. I mean, we all missed. Even some betas and stuff missed certain things. So with clipping and everything, and I know we fixed a few things after release as well. But I mean, a lot of it is, you feel the scene's working great, you're in the flow, and everything's going good, and then you go back the next day or something, and you realize, oh no. This doesn't quite work, or this expression, for whatever reason, I thought looked good, but boy, it's not working out. And again, that's why typically these scenes are gotten to Zor kind of as we go. So as I finish a scene, it'll get to Zor for coding, and then we can kind of step through it as a dev team as well. So then there may be some things that, I don't need this render, or we need some additional stuff here. And then there's things.
I need a young Max.
Yeah. So we'll talk about that in a second. I'm going to address K-Storm's other question here. So the majority of renders are called out in the script for you. There's no renders at all are called out in the script. So it's strictly dialogue with notes about what's taking place with the dialogue. So, you might have a description of the scene overall when we open into a scene. And then as far as dialogue, you might have, angry and then Max's dialogue. So that's the sort of thing that gets there, and then I'm the one who puts in where renders go. So, if there may be a character that's expressing something, but if I don't feel that we need to cut to them and show them for a render, then there won't be a render placed there, even if their whole expression may change. In that case, it just has to be conveyed through dialogue.
Yeah, no, I have actively tried to, when building this team from the beginning, I wanted separation of abilities. It isn't to say that we don't collaborate and work together, but I want it left up to the artist to envision what the writer has done. And the writer, again, the writer is writing this almost to a T as a script with a couple minor variances.
Mm-hmm.
And so there is description of the surroundings, there is description of the time, there is description of the emotion when necessary. But Roy gets to go through that and go, all right, here's what I picture here, here's what I picture here, here's what I picture here. And then when he's doing this and stepping through, he makes edits to the script and essentially makes a second copy of it, is probably the better way to say it. And then that's my copy to step through when I'm doing the coding. So I know where a render's supposed to go and then how it's supposed to follow dialogue or how dialogue is supposed to follow it.
We want to address Yun Max while we wait for some more questions?
Yeah.
So we were very close to the end of dot one. Very, very close. I think this was either the final or the next to final.
You were rendering the final scene, and I was at that one, and I was like, I need a young Max and a girlfriend.
Yes. So, and again, this was slightly more frustrating because normally it's not an unrealistic request, guys, but I thought this is the finish line, and then somebody took that and moved that 100 yards farther away. So I've been getting this and getting my energy level and like, hey, we're almost done, and then not. The good news for that is that I was able to use some of the tips that I've picked up and some of the processes I've gotten, that we were able to get those done along with a young bud as well, very quickly overall, and kind of nailed down. So that was my biggest concern, was how do you take a character and with all those wrinkles and all those the old man features and a little bit more old man before his time because of the smoking that he's got, and make him believably young. And so I tried some things, and luckily they worked out well in DAS, and we had that pretty quickly. But that was fun, and I think my first question to Zor on that was, is it just going to be for this one render? Because if so, I'm just going to ask that we see if we can rewrite and just miss it. But there will be other times you're going to see Yun Max and Yun Bud, so we decided that we were going to go ahead and push forward and get those done. All right, so L's got a comment, and why am I not on the menu? And I'm afraid that when you choose a name like N, it makes it incredibly tough to use in English and anybody to know. So that is why I wasn't aware of your nicknames of Any Pie and things like that I could have put. So maybe when the bar updates their menu in a few later releases, we'll put
so
you
like
in there.
Other UV cake, we could give him UV Any Pie.
If it makes you feel better, I'm not on the menu.
Yes. But first in our hearts, Marguerite. And also, I'm going to kind of veer in here so Marguerite can jump in a bit. But we do something unique, too. I haven't seen too many do this, at least, maybe one or two. But we have the Instagram, and we have exclusives on the Instagram, right? So there's images that don't make it anywhere else. We do post for a certain tier of patrons on up, where you get the Instagram image pack from the month before. But otherwise, we don't do a whole lot. We've got stuff that we're not putting down anywhere else that's on the Instagram, and that's an intentional thing. Marguerite does such a wonderful job there, and really building the anticipation, and we don't want to ruin it by letting people kind of skip that experience. She's fantastic with the Instagram stories and all that sort of thing. I'm not an Instagram person at all. I have an account, but I'm never on it. But I will check the Thunderline Instagram on a multiple times per day basis, sometimes hoping maybe she's given us a 2-for-1 or something one day, just to see. And so it's been great to kind of have that we can kind of sit down the beginning or the end of a month, figure out what's coming up for the next month, what we want to do special. So like those Valentine's things that you see are all because Marguerite requested those. So silly me didn't even have that idea that, maybe we should do some Valentine's renders with the girls. So those sorts of things you can thank Marguerite for, as well as the behind the scenes and the wonderful stuff she's done there.
Wait, does that mean we're doing St. Patty's Day?
Hell yeah.
It's a bar, bro. Come on. So we've if some of you with certain tiers have already seen Cronut getting drunk at the bar, so you can imagine what vendor he'll go on for St. Patty's Day. Oh, and I also Jot it down to me, Mark. And I also do want to say too that in some cases you just have to shamelessly rip off people. So if anybody's played City of Broken Dreamers, they will recognize Cronut as a very close relative of a certain character that occasionally makes appearances there.
On that note, we might as well plug it. Philly Games.
Yes, Philly
City
Games.
Broken Dreamers. Go play it.
Yeah, if you
it's still in development. He just had his .5. I think .6 is one of the next months. Don't quote me on that. But he has a completed game, Depraved Awakening. It's amazing. Go play it.
Speaking of Cronut, I believe Monday he's going to be making a special appearance. You guys are gonna want to keep an eye out.
Fuck, I didn't even know about that.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
Yes. That thing we've been talking about.
Yes. I think I finished like 2 weeks ago, so I don't even remember that I did it. Yeah.
I don't remember what I did 2 days ago.
Yeah, that's pretty much me. If it wasn't for the render tracker, I'd have no idea where I was in the sorts of things. So, do we want to talk just a bit about kind of how .2 is shaping up, and some of the improvements we've done kind of to process and stuff to, again, I know one of the big things that we've mentioned before, at least on Patreon with the dev updates and stuff, is, we don't give release dates. We're aiming for every couple of months. Trust me if I say that if we could do that quicker, we would. We wanted to get these out to you as quick as possible while still maintaining quality, of course. But we also do have lives apart from the game. And that means that there's certain things that we have to take into account. And I mean, too, people get sick, people go on vacations. I had to go out of town for a relative's wedding a couple weeks ago. One of the reasons I wasn't around for the .1 release. And so these sorts of things, when they happen, it's real life, and obviously people can get sick and stuff like that. But I'm going to let Zora talk about several of the improvements, because most of the improvements have been on his end, and then I'll just kind of talk a little bit about some of the ways that I'm handling the enormous more number of renders for .2 while still trying to get to a decent schedule without burning out.
I just want to know what improvements you're talking about.
Well, I mean, your pipeline and the the things we discovered with the animations, the issues that we had there. We figured out what was going on there.
Yeah, so we know what happened with the animations, the ones that were quality. Part of it had to do with the dumbing down of Android and a misunderstanding on my part that essentially when you do an Android port and you dumb down the animations, you do that only for the Android port, not both the PC, Linux, Mac, and Android. So we will be making some changes. The next update, I believe we will have the Android port compressed correctly, so the animations won't run poorly on Android machines, but they'll still be full quality on PC and Mac. As far as if I recall correctly, the PC and Mac ones are now up to date as of
Yes.
.19.
Mm-hmm.
So those are fine. Android is also that, but I know the unofficial copy does have them recompressed again. So our copy is only going to run on faster, better hardware. It runs just fine on my phone, but it is not my tablet.
There's that sexy cough.
Sorry?
There's that sexy cough.
Yeah, it comes and goes. It's way better than it was a month ago. I'm working on, so we got a couple of points where people said the clanking at the bar was too distracting, so I have adjusted that and moved it to the sound slider. So that will make that a little easier for next go around. I really want to try to figure out how to make it its own slider. I want it by itself. I know it's doable. I just don't know how yet. So that's something I'm hoping to have solved by the time .2 is released, but I don't know. Yeah, and as for the pipeline, there is compression in it now for the images, so the size will be significantly reduced compared to the 300 that it was last time. We do have it down to, I believe, 108.
For Android?
Yeah, for Android. And then once we get compression finalized for the animations, and that'll probably be as far as we take it. I think the gentleman who does the unofficials, he adds some niceties to it that I was looking at putting into, and juice isn't worth the squeeze to me, so I'm going to leave it because he's still planning on doing his ports. So I think I'm just going to leave well enough alone. The people who have the better hardware, they can use ours. If that doesn't work, that guy will have his. So that's how that's going to flow. But yeah, I guess that's really all the improvements. The whole thing has been a learning experience. I mean, from the day that we really started, like the day that Roy started making the game renders. It has been a learning experience since then, because he got about 3 or 4 scenes in, and then I started coding. And then I'm getting refamiliar with Python and having to remember how to do certain things. Because when you step through with RenPy, if all you're doing is just text and dialogue, you don't have to worry about any kind of extra input. There's no RenPy needed. But if you want to do anything that's outside just basic scripting norm, you have to invoke a Python call. And that's where I have to try and remember, or best case scenario, Google it. And you learn. So it's like I said, and I think it was one of my dev updates, I said this entire thing is a learning process. It's every day. It's that I sit at the front of the computer. It's learning something new. And Storm's question, at least half a day each week. So trust me, we have our downtime. It's kind of one of these where we go until we've had enough. I've walked away from my desktop before just because I needed a break. Roy has taken a day or two here and there, just away from renders. I mean, he uses that time differently than I would, but he's not sitting at his desk rendering. I mean, you can elaborate more on that, but that's where I am. If I need to break, I take a break. If I don't, I like to push through. I'm not worried about burnout. I don't do this often enough where it's burnout. I mean, I have my job, and at the end of the night, I still end up watching TV and relaxing with my wife. So it's not something that from the time I get home until the time I go to bed, I'm at my desktop coding. And like right now, I'm not coding. I'll have some coding here next week because I know we're working on those two. We'll have those 2 comics to make yet. Mm-hmm. And then I know you'll have finalized renders within the next week or so.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, I've got a lot of renders done. It's just I've got to put them through post now, so that'll be a bit of time. And so I'll talk a bit about that because that kind of leads me into my process as well. So, creativity is an interesting thing. So when you're doing something like this, you can get in the zone, and then other days you can just literally stare at the screen or make some adjustments and nothing's coming out right. So I try to take advantage of when I have those times, but having experienced burnout in a job before, I'm more cognizant of when I'm reaching those loads, and so I try not to go, too close to the edge, too close to overdrive. And in terms of time away, time away from my job is usually the most productive for renders. And obviously then if I was doing renders, the job wouldn't be very productive. So I have to kind of balance those out. But I am taking some time off here and there. I've taken the job's been busier this week, and I'll talk more about it in the dev update, but job's been busier this week, so I've taken off some additional time as well to kind of get through that as far as that goes. And, I've got an internal quota each day that I try to get through, each day that I'm rendering. But one of the things that I just try to keep in mind is, day I'm just not feeling it or something, it's okay. And so when those really productive times, I try to get as much done as I can without, working insane hours. I go to bed at a normal time every night. I'm not, staying up till 3 or 4 a.m. Yep, that's no, and I don't think that's ever going to happen. That's not the way. I'm too ancient for that now. It's not the way my body's going to work. So, I'm a night owl anyway a bit, but usually right about midnight or so is when my body's ready to call it a night. So I'll do that. It's mostly relaxing. I'm just sitting in front of a computer. I don't do this on a laptop. I have a nice desktop with a giant screen, and occasionally tries to cook me with the render rig, but it's pretty nice, and TV's on in the background and that sort of thing. So, obviously burnout's something you worry about, especially when you've seen so many other devs go for it. But ultimately, we want to do this in a sustainable way. We know we're going to be able to do releases quickly enough that, while people are anxious to get them, as we all are, nobody's going to be sitting there saying it's been 6 months, what the heck's going on? You've seen the way we communicate. That's one of the big things that we really emphasized early on as we came together as a team. Is
Roy usually hounds me for my dev updates.
Yeah, and I do have to hound Zora for his dev updates. But we want to communicate, and even over. I mean, you can always just choose not to read a dev update one week. I'm not insulted. It's not a big deal. But let you know, hey, this is what we're working on. This is what we've done. Just let you know that progress is being made, and then of course you see the different rewards and stuff to the different tiers from time to time from us as well. But some of the things that I do to track is, I mean, I have spreadsheets that track all sorts of different stuff. So everything from my renders that I'll need for scenes, what's completed, what's been put through post, what needs to be rendered, what animations are done and ready to go, what need to be rendered, what need to be fixed, and then track a whole bunch of other stuff that probably drives Zora nuts with the amount of spreadsheets that I keep. But
It doesn't drive me nuts. I've never seen them, so
yeah.
I just know they're there.
But one of the big things that we try to do is, keep good track of that. And I don't want to say we operate it like a business, but that's been my background. So, it is a business in a sense.
To run it that way.
Yep, yeah. We wanna be accountable to our shareholders, for lack of a better term, which is you guys, our patrons. And so, we listen to feedback where we've got some potential tweaks in the pipeline to some things that I can't get into now, but you've seen some tweaks we made to the tiers before based on feedback and everything. So we listen to feedback. The one area I'd say we're probably less open to feedback than some is just the writing, because again, our writer's done an excellent job at crafting such a good story. And so if you start to shoehorn other stuff in there, you kind of run the risk of that getting a little jumbled. And that's why we have the lewd scenes that aren't canon. That's why we have the ability for you guys to request custom renders or custom comics, if you've got the means to do so, to give you that outlet. And then, of course, we've got special renders and things like that I do from month to month. But it's been an interesting journey, especially figuring out how to pump out 400 plus renders per update reliably. But I think we've got the tools in place. I can't think of the last time that I sat in front of my computer all day and rendered, right? So there are breaks that are taken not just to eat, but just literally to be like, okay, I'm taking the next hour to zone out and watch TV or check Twitter or something like that. Then I'll come back to it.
No, but then the nice thing is, right now, I'm kind of on a perpetual break. I have been, if we get bugs, I address them, and depending on how bad they are, I may build or I may not.
Mm-hmm.
And you're busting your ass on renders. But then at the back half of, during the interim of releases, you slow down and then I pick up. So then you're fixing stuff that maybe I catch, or fixing stuff in a beta, or doing the small extra stuff, but you're not having to do your internal set desired number of renders per day.
Yeah, I mean,
I do want to address in really quick, because I'm going to have to type it to him because he said he can't hear us. I guess I'm not opposed to the idea, but he said, do you plan to do any kind of contest between two updates? I definitely don't think we'll do one this time, just because the characters are kind of being developed.
There is a...
We do kind of have a contest going on Monday.
There is a contest coming up on Monday. I'm going to.
Why am I not told these things? I look like an idiot.
You were told this.
Attention.
You were told this multiple times, but that's okay.
Then I definitely forgot.
I got
So there will be
you guys.
Yes.
Go ahead, Roy.
No, there will be a contest on Monday. I'm not going to reveal any more details. Marguerite will have it on Instagram. So that's where the announcement's going to take place. So again, guys, Instagram's free. You can't view the stories without an account, but you can view all the other posts otherwise without an account. So go check that out. But we've got that, and I'm betting it'll probably be more some of in those styles and things like that. I don't know fan fiction and that sort of thing.
I do like the idea of a fan art contest, though.
But a fan art could be pretty interesting. So we'll consider that and see. Again, we're kind of just getting started.
I honestly don't know that I'd want to do it until after .3. And the team knows why I'm saying that.
Yes.
Yes.
Yep. And
So
Philly is actually taking it. Excuse me. Newsflash.
No.
Philly is taking a break right now. I'd like to just to note this for posterity on this Twitch stream, which is being recorded.
Screenshot that.
You should.
Or he deletes it. Got it. All right. Indefinite now.
Oh, just for 15 more minutes.
All right. Well, we actually are nearing the end.
Yes.
I have stuff I still have to get done today. No, it's actually not for the game. But thank you, everyone who joined, and thank you guys very much for your questions. These are all great questions, so thank you guys very much. I know we're doing another one of these next month. We don't have a date picked out yet, but it'll probably be around the same time, middle of the month. That seems to work, Roy?
Yeah, I think so. We'll just have to see with schedules and stuff. I think I'm actually maybe kind of more out the middle of the month, but we'll figure out something. So we'll give you plenty of announcements. We've got, I think, the bugs ironed out with this fairly well. So we look forward to doing these. So by all means, questions and stuff can go. I mean, I think in the interim, questions can go in this channel, and we'll just kind of try to keep track. And
well, that would be the thing, though. So for those listening, if Roy, we want to do that, no idle chatter. Don't comment on the questions. Don't mock the questions. If you have a question, write it in. If you don't put one in.
Yep.
And then we'll have to talk to the mods and just make sure they keep an eye on things.
Sounds good to me. Well, guys, everybody, have a great weekend. Some of you are from the future, and your weekends are farther progressed. But for those of us here in North America, on a Saturday afternoon, evening, it's been a nice break, and I'm going to get back to rendering because I just finished getting most of an initial scene set up, and it's our largest for .2. So I'm going to go work on that a bit.
Thanks for joining, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Take care, everyone.
Appreciate it.
Thanks again.